Thank you. Other speakers, please.
Mr. Chair, members, Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I just want to say that there are some policies and staff and some responsibilities of government that should be left to government as a responsibility to the constituents. While we do support public-private partnerships, we do support a responsible private-public partnership done in the right way. We believe this policy goes far and beyond that and is too extreme for the state of California. For those reasons, we urge your opposition.
Thank you. Other speakers? Comments or questions from senators, please? Senator Hertzberg and then Senator Bates, please.
I want to address the approach you've taken in the legislation, Senator Morlock, because, as we old lawyers say, it assumes facts, not evidence. It works off a premise, an appropriate premise, that the cost to government for services should be as reasonable as possible, right? And there's a lot of determination of what that means. But it also, you know, it assumes facts like when we look, for example, at the cost of building highways. Well, you know, what's happened in California is, at least in my anecdotal experience, of $3.2 billion spent to widen the 405 freeway near where I live, because you got to take out mountains and you got to take out houses and you got to deal with all these difficult challenges and issues. Basically, say, rather than in some other states where when you build something, the cost of construction is much less. It doesn't examine those circumstances. It takes these numbers and makes assumptions about those, and then arbitrarily says each year we're going to reduce the amount of money we're going to spend on state implementation, rather than, you know, and saying we're going to offload that to the private sector. But if you're going to look, and as you well know by virtue of your expertise as an accountant in this space, you've got to analyze all costs. You know, I certainly saw this in my world as of the time I was out of government, but, you know, when you have a private sector, folks, you got a whole process to be able to do bids. And then you have bid protests, and you have time delays, and you have litigation, and you have exposure to a whole host of costs that when you look at the balance sheet, it seems to me that when you're going to look at trying to deliver those services, you should look at that. We know from Robert Osborne's book some years ago, Reinventing Government, as I mentioned to you, David Osborne, excuse me. I'm prejudiced to the, yeah, I'm prejudiced to, well, David's my son, but I'm prejudiced to the word Robert. It's better because it's a good name. So in any event, my point is that the garbage collectors lost in Phoenix, Arizona to a private sector company only to shortly be replaced because they could determine that they could provide the service more efficiently. And so all I'm suggesting to you is that when you do this, and what you've really done in this measure is you've taken and put some kind of explosive ideas out there that on the surface, if you didn't look past them, you could draw those conclusions. I'm only suggesting, as I know you would do, is to take a deeper dive, number one, and two, create a correlation of what that looks like, because we just have this mechanical approach. You know, on this date, we're going from 15 to 20%, and then to 25, then to 30, without any designation of what to do, how to do it, what the circumstances are, what the costs are, you know, and really drilling into this stuff. So I mean, I understand what you're trying to accomplish with respect to this measure, but it to me needs a much deeper think, and that you can engage in as you spend time in your service here in state government to think about what that looks like. Because what I've found out, you know, is that quite frankly, in many of these instances, not in every instance, but in many of these instances, we can argue on the private sector what things do, but we're not really looking at the full boat of what the costs are on the public sector side in comparing apples to apples. So as a consequence, I won't be supporting your measure today, and I wanted to gracefully tell you that.
Thank you.
Well, may I respond to that?
Yes, of course. We allow that.
Through the chair, Senator Hertzberg, I just want to thank you for your sage advice to this freshman. Sometimes you sort of wish you could put up a screen and do a PowerPoint and give you the deep dive of what information we found. I've filled a binder. I could give you a pretty good seminar on the materials and the information that hasn't been covered. In my 20 years in elected office, I had a lot of fun running a department. And I had to do these analyses. Is it better to go external and outsource, or is it better to go internal and do it internally, what can we, you know, what are the costs? What are the benefits? And I will tell you that there are a lot of reasons to keep staff internal. We saved a lot of money doing our own investing, doing our own tax collecting. And there are a lot of places where we outsource that's made a lot of sense. So I've enjoyed that kind of aspect for a good dozen years. So I respect your concern. It's hard to give information to an august body like this in sound bites. But the state Senate's, the state auditor's report said 62% of projects by Caltrans were over budget. And they also said in the report, it's really hard to get the data. And the LAO said the same thing. We've analyzed, we think it's 3,500 employees, but the data is not forthcoming.
And was there analysis of the of budget overruns with respect to private sectors and change orders and the like? So because at the end of the day, you're trying to build something, right? And the question is, who's going to do it? What were those change orders? What were those costs associated with? What litigation? Because you go talk to some of these contractors who build this stuff, and there's litigation in every single case that you don't have on the public sector side. And it seems to me it's only appropriate to roll in those costs. Did they do that? Have you done that in your homework?
I have not done that in my homework. Great question. But what I have done, if I could continue, is looked at other states. The state of Arizona, 80% to 85% is outsourced. Most efficiently run states, and you look at the metrics, are doing a lot more outsourcing. OCTA, where I'm from, Orange County Transportation, 50-50, wearing their tie today out of respect.
Yeah, well, I'm going to nail you guys in that freeway that you get tickets on for driving. It's the worst thing in the world.
All right.
Well,
is the LAO here to answer that question?
Were you speeding?
No, I couldn't stop because they don't want workers to be able to go to toll booths. So they give you tickets automatically.
That's not the OCTA, unless it's the 91 freeway that you're talking about it.
It's the DC.
It's all the same.
It's
the 241 and the 261.
Okay, we have representatives for questions from the legislative analyst, and I believe somebody from Caltrans is also here. Who's Caltrans staff? Come forward, please. So we can talk about this.
Jessica Peters with the analyst's office. Senator, if you could repeat the question.
My question is, when you did your analysis based upon the conclusion that Senator Morlock, I didn't read the report, says that there were excess number of employees, the cost overruns were 64% of the projects. We just got testimony that they were at least on time. Now the testimony here says that there were cost overruns. My question is, did you do an analysis of those projects where you had private contractors involved and analyze what their cost overruns were so you can compare apples to apples?
So I think there's a couple of different issues here. In our COS program review, which is where I think the original numbers are coming from, that was looking at the total COS program, regardless of whether it was state staff or private contractors. And that was sort of just the broad brush view of the COS program overall having certain issues with lack of accountability, issues with overstaffing, issues with poor quality of data, and looking at the very detailed data that Caltrans uses to develop its budget and its annual staffing request, and finding that that staffing request is generally inflated and based on unreliable data. And so that's where that number is coming from. And then I think there's sort of a separate question in terms of relating to this bill, the cost of state staff versus consultants. We didn't evaluate that in the COS program review, but separately in looking at that issue, we found that the costs are generally about the same.
Okay, how about Caltrans? Do you have any comments on this?
Melanie Perrin, Caltrans Legislative Director. I also have Stephen Keck, our Chief Budget Officer.
Okay,
just in regards to the general staffing, we have refuted again and again about the general staffing numbers, if we are overstaffed or not. We have decreased our staff by 26%, as Ted Toppin has indicated, over the past 7 years. We continue to do annual zero-based budgeting to ensure that we are appropriately staffed. And additionally, when it comes to our engineering staff, what we're looking at in the Capital Outlay Support Program is it's not just about construction. We have environmental, we have right-of-way, we have design. There are many different components that come with the project delivery, the Capital Outlay Program. So there's many different things that come into that consideration for when we're looking at what staffing is needed.
Okay, can I ask a question? Senator, your bill is a 5% and a reduction. And it's assuming that there's going to be an attrition rate of 5%. And I wanted to ask, is the Caltrans attrition rate 5%, or what's the projected attrition rate?
I do not have a projected attrition rate, but I can tell you over the past 5 years, our average annual attrition rate has been 3.2%. So it is less than the 5% number.
So if it was required to have 5% attrition rate, would that result in employees being laid off if that was required?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, so that's an issue with this bill. Then can I ask another question about transparency, because that's an important subject we're talking about here. In terms of the zero-based budget concept and the program that Caltrans does for budgeting, I think the senator had numbers that he was giving that were developed, I guess, from an outside organization, or inside and outside, Senator?
Various sources.
So, various sources. So does the budgeting process provide the legislature with the cost of delivering projects in terms of private sector engineering versus internal engineering staff in terms of the delivery of construction projects?
I'm not sure if we do the breakdown like that, but I'll defer to Stephen Keck to answer that.
You could just throw that
Stephen
mic
Keck
right
with
up,
Caltrans.
right up, pull that mic right up to you so I can hear it.
Certainly in hearings, we have provided that information in the past, or at least our best estimates. Certainly, it's like comparing apples and oranges with respect to state costs for engineers and outsourcing engineers. I think where we've had these conversations before, what we've always stated was, you know, the flexibility to be able to hire both kinds when it's important is really what we're focusing on.
We require the budget process to compile and develop a process to evaluate both private sector and public sector cost and the cost of delivery, because I think one of the issues, I'll just say this, is when you shouldn't just look at the cost of an engineer, you should look at the cost of how quickly you can build and develop the project and the total cost of engineering construction. Because if you delay a project because you don't have sufficient or lengthy engineering time, then the cost of the project is more. It doesn't matter if it's engineering costs or construction costs. So I think for me, having a budget that's transparent, that evaluates the overall engineering costs, but also the project delivery, the construction cost of projects, and evaluating, and I'll just say this, different, we have Caltrans divided up in different divisions, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I think you've got to have those divisions show who's the most efficient, and a way of developing data, information for the legislature to determine the efficiency of these organizations through the zero-based budgeting process. Now I kind of think this is something that Senator Morlock, I'd like to work with you on, as we talked about, as opposed to this particular way of dealing with that issue. Because I think project delivery, evaluating whether it's better to do a contract versus an inside, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Now, when you're doing your bill, are these projects both shop repair and rehabilitation projects and construction, or just the construction?
We were just working on the COS.
The COS, that's the construction.
Correct.
Projects, not the shop.
Which from the data available.
Now, that's the question I have for Caltrans. When you do their 90-10 thing, is that for both the shop and the construction of larger projects?
It is just for our capital outlay support program. So that is, it's predominantly STIP, but.
No, it's predominantly shop with STIP, so it would be related to all capital outlay
Let's get an
projects.
answer, okay? You got the question, now give me an answer.
Okay, so the answer is the COS program is related to all construction, which includes the shop, our highway protection
So those are kind of like smaller.
Some of them can be quite large. It's the rehabilitation of the state highway system. And also the STIP, which is the highway capacity and oftentimes transit capacity improving projects.
Okay.
And we're finding, Chairman, that the COS has about 10,000 employees, which represents about half of Caltrans staff.
Yes, okay. What's the number of people involved in that?
Give me one moment while I find that number.
It's about 9,700.
Well, she'll get it.
As of, in this fiscal year, we are anticipating 9,700.
That's FTEs, I believe.
That is FTEs.
That's FTEs, which includes state staff and contracted staff.
Okay. Okay, my approach, members, is to work with Senator Morlock, and he's a great accountant, he knows these things, to develop more specific data that we can make evaluations through the zero-based budgeting, to improve the zero-based budgeting for the legislature to make evaluations in this committee and in our own committee, the Government Finance Committee, so we can evaluate the efficiency and the project delivery cost and timelines for projects, because that's what we should be doing in this legislature, to make sure that these projects are delivered quicker. And that's our job, to make the projects deliver quicker. And the faster we can, I've always kind of had the attitude, the faster we can deliver projects, the better. Sometimes it means that if you have a certain number of staff and you want to deliver a project and you need to hire extra people or contracts to make that project delivery faster, that's a benefit to the state to deliver the project faster. Is that the way Caltrans works with project delivery?
So when it comes to contracting out, what we're looking at is it does provide flexibility for us. And certainly if we are looking at a new revenue package, we would like to look at what opportunities there are for flexibility so we can deliver the amount of projects that have potential with the amount of revenue coming in. Now, for contracting out, specifically what we're looking at when we're contracting out is we're looking at geographical flexibility. We're going to have geographical challenges of where we're going to have some expertise and not. Additionally, we're going to need consultants who do have certain expertise that we may not have in-house. And then again, spike in workload is always a consideration. And then construction seasons. Construction seasons are typically in the summer versus the winter. So we're looking at those components when it comes to delivering projects.
Yeah, okay. Senator Bates, thank you. Thank you for those answers. Senator Bates had some questions.
I do. The he said, she said on whose numbers are right and not right are, I think, very difficult for those of us who are going to make some of the decisions on the bills. So I'm going to go to the LAO again, and I know that our Budget Committee Vice Chair Senator Nielsen did send a letter that specifically asked LAO to look into the cost of contractors versus the cost of permanent state positions for the COS program. And I'd like you to comment on the findings of that request, because I think I heard you say you hadn't done an evaluation of that, and maybe not the depthy evaluation that Senator Hertzberg was mentioning. But are you, getting a direction from that we will be able to use if we do go forward and looking at efficiencies and perhaps the way we divide the work? Because we need that information.
Sure. Yes, we did do a request for Senator Nielsen. Our understanding is we're allowed to share that today. In terms of the different numbers that have been provided, it was mentioned that there's certain estimates of the cost of state staff or of contractors that are provided in the budget. In terms of trying to answer the request, we looked at those, and we found that those numbers were not really supported by actual data. And so what we actually did was looked at the actual costs for consultants based on a sampling of actual consultant invoices over a broad range of work. And we had to do this because, again, the sort of the overarching numbers that Caltrans uses were not supported by data, and they actually don't have a data system to track what their costs are. And so, yes, and so in doing that, we compared the full cost of the consultants that we sampled to the fully loaded cost of state staff, which would include the salary, overtime, sick leave, vacation, healthcare, retirement benefits, overhead, and equipment. And in doing that, we found that the costs were roughly the same at about $140 an hour. And so comparing, state staff to a consultant on an individual staff basis, the costs were about the same. We were further asked about additional fiscal implications, and that's where we found that there can be some benefits of having consultants as opposed to state staff for a portion of the work. Certainly, the state is going to want a stable core state staff to handle much of the work. But there's certain instances, for example, temporary work that's been mentioned, spikes in workload, that you wouldn't want to hire permanent state staff to handle. In addition, even for that core workload, there is a need to have some consultants to provide both that expert services that Ms. Perrin mentioned, as well as to provide flexibility in order to have the right classification of staff in the right location at the right time. And so adjusting the total levels as well as adjusting the mix. And so having a greater amount of consultants could provide that additional flexibility.
But when you say, excuse me, could, that suggests that you need to do more study in that area and get some more specific data so that you could do a more in-depth review of the sharing of private and public. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think that the benefits of having flexibility are well established. I think the department would even agree that having some percentage of consultants affords them that flexibility. So, I mean, if you're using consultants, you can hire the person when you need them at the right skill set and the right classification in the right location for the time you need them, and only for that amount of time. Certainly that wouldn't necessarily replace the core stable state staff, but having a greater percentage of consultants would appear to provide more flexibility, which would have a fiscal benefit to the state.
Well, I think that's kind of fundamental in what Senator Morlock's bill is trying to achieve by increasing percentages, looking at an annual basis as he's proposing, if we're actually getting those cost savings. So I think that's a very good component of his concept. I have another question for you. I specifically asked our Director of Caltrans during the informational hearings to respond to the staffing issue. I think that's still something that's not really clarified. Did we really achieve reduction in staff so that what we currently have is what we really need for the existing jobs that are before Caltrans, or is there some sort of, vague unfilled positions that are still being funded where the money could be released for projects?
Sure, I'm happy to provide a little bit more information. And apologies that we weren't able to provide it at the initial hearing. I believe what was testified to at that time is that since 2007-8, roughly 3,400 COS positions have been eliminated. Those numbers are based on budgeted levels, which included some over budgeting or inflated budgeting in the program. What we did in our analysis and in the program review, which I just want to clarify too, was part of the administration's zero-based budgeting that we did together collaboratively with them. What we used were the actual numbers of how many state staff were actually hired, so getting away from the vacant positions, because those positions were never filled to actually do work. And when looking at the actual numbers, and this is coming from the governor's budget, these are not our estimates, these are the administration's numbers, it was 1,880 full-time equivalents that have been reduced since 2007-8. We accounted for those reductions in the program review and tried to, average it out and smooth it out as much as we can. There was a significant increase in workload due to the federal stimulus funds and the Prop 1B funds, and so we tried to account for all of those factors. Our estimate then was the 3,500 positions overstaffing. It's a rough estimate. Ideally, you'd have that detailed zero-based budgeting look, but because the data is so poor or inflated that the department's using in their zero-based budgeting effort, we felt that that was not appropriate to use. And so we did account for that in our staffing numbers, and the actual numbers based on the administration is the 1,880 in terms of reductions. I would note that since our analysis, the administration reduced another 178 positions, as was noted by Mr. Toppin earlier, so that would bring down the number that we would estimate in terms of the overstaffing level.
So that's not a lot from 3,500. You said they were overstaffed. Are you standing by that number minus the 178?
Correct, yes. The only thing that has changed in that time is the reduction of the 178, so it's probably in the neighborhood of roughly 3,300 at this point in time. We would caution it, so it is a rough number, but that was our best estimate based on the best data that we had confidence in.
Well, I think what's troubling, again, to a policymaker, I would speak for myself, we need to make our decisions based on what are really accurate numbers. And we look to that third-party review that the LAO does. And when I hear a challenge that's not accurate, not fair, I really think we need to, Chairman Bell, we need to find a method so that the information that we are getting is, balanced, it's accurate, and we can depend on it. And we do depend on our LAO to give us that because they are supposed to be unbiased and not driven by special interest other than, protecting the taxpayers who fund this organization called their government. So I don't know what we do going forward, but we need to ensure that we don't attack the LAO because they're not putting out the numbers that we want to hear.
Yeah, I understand that. I agree. I think that the next step for me is to get the LAO and Caltrans to improve the zero-based budgeting process so we have transparency in all those numbers. So I think you obviously said that there's problems with getting data, and I think that has to be fixed. And I expect that to be fixed before the process of reviewing the budget. So, that's we got to deal with that. Other senators, Senator McGuire and Senator Leyva and Senator Allen, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Do appreciate the conversation and do appreciate Mr. Morlock bringing this forward. I was just going to suggest, I do think it's probably the next important step is what you just said that should be taken is in regards to getting the LAO and Caltrans together in the same room. Because I know from our original hearing, I'm looking at a July 20th letter that all of us believe were copied on, talking about the capital outlay program, looking at about a 3,400, this is approximately 3,400 full-time equivalent positions, or 26%, have been reduced since 07-08 from Caltrans. And this is in response to Senator Bates' question. But I know from the district, I have two districts, Caltrans districts, District 2, District 4, both in the south and the north. And in the south, which is the Bay Area region, we have challenges being able at times to deliver because of a hiring freeze. And what I've seen, and I am not an expert, what I've seen, what is the most significant cost driver is that during the recession, we are seeing the average project in the Bay Area district come in 30% below engineer's estimate, which then allowed particularly self-help counties to be able to invest that savings in additional interchanges or lanes. And as we are now starting to see the economy improve, and as particularly private contractors who's doing the bulk of the work, at least in our region, I can't speak for anywhere else, their workload's picked up, which is the demand is there, which means bids are going higher. And I say all of that because I think that we need to take a holistic view, and I do appreciate Mr. Moloch bringing that forward. I do think we need to look at a holistic view of if there are challenges, let's go after it, and I do wholly support that premise. But I also think it needs to be that holistic view because I'm not sure it's engineering. In fact, we have challenges on our side in our district being able to have enough engineering staff to be able to get the project moved. And what I've seen is it's the economy that drives a lot of the bids. And that's what we're starting to see. And I can only speak for the San Francisco Bay region as well as the North Coast, is where we're starting to see bids go up. So I do think that necessary first step is going to be LAO and Caltrans. Because according to Director Dougherty, there has been that 3,400 or 26% since 07-08 reduced.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Other Senator Sotomayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're hearing a lot about our infrastructure and our roads and maintenance. And we're on the other side, we're talking about Caltrans workers, and we're talking about folks being laid off, people eliminating positions, people losing their jobs. So I'm not sure how we fix our roads and how we keep our infrastructure up and going if we continue to reduce jobs. And I'm kind of starting to feel like there's a number that folks want to get to of jobs that we reduce at Caltrans, and I don't really see the benefit there. And I also just want to say that contracting out and using consultants is a slippery slope. And if that is something that folks are interested in, we need to be very, very careful and very cautious, because these are people at Caltrans who are highly skilled and are good at their jobs. I haven't heard anyone say that they're not doing a good job, but we want to eliminate some of them for whatever reason. And of course, I always support efficiency. We want to make sure things are done quickly and efficiently and the way they're supposed to be done. But I'm worried that all we're talking about is eliminating positions when we're trying to fix our roads and our infrastructure, and maybe we're looking at doing it in a cheaper fashion, which it doesn't sound like is necessarily true. Contracting out doesn't necessarily do that. So I just want to caution us and figure out what it is exactly you're trying to get to, Senator Morlock.
Thank you to the chair.
Senator, you may respond.
Thank you.
And then Senator Allen, I believe you have comments.
Senator Leyva, I guess I want to attack it a few different ways. One is, if I don't know if anywhere in the analyses we said layoffs. We're transitioning over from current employees to or staffing to shift over to doing more outside. If you look at the demographics within the department, the average ages are provided, and 54% of them are 50 and older. So in this 8-year period, we could certainly see a much larger migration out than was quoted earlier. Also, if you're getting $3 billion a year, if you get half the taxes from gas and registration fees, et cetera, that are being proposed, you're actually finding that your overall project load has expanded. So moving over, it's bigger, so the moving over to 5, 10, 15, 20% is easier without any layoffs whatsoever. So I think the big thing that I want to maybe emphasize is not that we're arguing about whether internal is 116 or 140 or whatever, and external is the same. It's that once you hire someone internal, it's very difficult to say, project's over, we have to terminate you. But if you hire external, it's very easy to say the contract's over, hope to see you on the next job, it's done. So you don't have to face this layoff reduction issue. You become more nimble and you become more accessible to the economic trends, which was mentioned before, and you spare the department from having to make the hard cuts when these cycles occur. I'm old enough, I've gone through a few of these, so it's in Senator Bates and I, we had to lay off 1,000 employees. It was not fun going through the Great Recession these last few years. So we know that drill, and so we're saying, boy, let's make it better for the department. Let's make it better for management to be able to work all the projected projects, get it all done, be fair to employees and to the outside sector. So we're giving jobs to the private sector as well, which then can pay taxes and help fund the road.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just say I think we have a philosophical difference.
Senator Berryhill, you
I'm
have.
shocked.
Yeah, at the proper time, I'd like to move this bill.
Okay, you want to just make a motion now?
I moved the
Okay,
bill.
you move the bill. Senator Allen, please. There's a motion for the bill on the floor.
My comments are that I actually really appreciate this discussion. I do think I agree with Senator McGuire. It looks like we need to get a better sense of these discrepancies between LAO and Caltrans. Right. I do think that the page 3 of the analysis does a good job of examining some of my core concerns, and I really do, my core concerns with the bill, though what I most appreciate about this discussion is the fact that we're talking about, finding a way to make sure that when we're, spending money on these projects, we're not only doing right by our taxpayers, but in many ways, more importantly, we're doing right by all those people, most of whom are taxpayers, who really do rely on our transportation infrastructure, both for the state's quality of life and for our economic vitality. I do very much appreciate the fact that Senator Bell is, I think, basically addressing a number of these issues with his bill when it comes to,
that's what we're doing.
The efficiency plan that he would ask Caltrans to, send to the Transportation Commission as part of SBX 11. So I wanted to make sure that that's highlighted.
Senator Morlock, as I said, I'd like to work with you on the efficiencies, but unfortunately, I cannot support the motion on the floor. And I'd like to allow you to make a close if you'd like.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate my first experience and your graciousness to me.
Always be there.
class act. For me, it's a marketing concern. We're going to be asking the taxpayers for another tax increase. This one is going to affect every taxpayer because they're all buying gas. They're all driving cars, theoretically. So it's going to hit those at the bottom rungs a lot harder than it's going to hit those that are earning the salaries of engineers and architects. So I want to be real sensitive that we're marketing to the taxpayers that we have the best Department of Transportation in the nation, and that they are following the best business practices possible. They need to be nimble. They need to be efficient. And I, hopefully with this bill, am challenging staff to be more transparent, to provide better numbers. So we don't have internal debates. Senator Bates and I, when we got audit reports on our planning department or our human resources department, we changed management pretty quick. We made some major changes. So when you see some of these reports and clearly telling you you're not getting the kind of data you need, something has to be done. So I hope that we're challenging Caltrans by saying, look, taxpayers are expecting the best product, the best staffing, the most efficient way to build roads. When we read that 20% of every tax dollar hits the roads, we've got to deal with some of these metrics and start understanding what we're overseeing. So I'm really appreciative of this discussion. It's been very illuminating. The goal has been to find efficiencies in our transportation budgets at Caltrans specifically, and this has been the consistent theme, including yours, Senator Bell, in creating a 30% efficiency threshold in Caltrans. The basic question is why raise taxes before we do a single thing to assure the taxpayers that the department is working as well as it should? And I think that's why this is a reasonable approach to consider. I've already stated that I've had the privilege of running a department that oversaw billions of taxpayer dollars and was scrutinized by at least 4 to 5 audits every year. So I'm very familiar personally with thorough oversight. I'm appreciative of the LAO's report and being forthright. You have relied on the LAO for your budget planning. So we have some confidence there. And for me, when you see what's in the report, it just screams out for attention. So, Mr. Chair, I'm reacting to that. I don't think, although we're being told by union leaders and staff that everything is fine, I don't feel that comfort level, and that's something that we've got to work on. The Caltrans vision statement says that they want to be a transparent and accountable organization, and we want to help them in doing that. We're not, restricting them from hiring engineers, but we're just saying, look, as you go through your attrition, as you expand on your workload, we can migrate over to be a more nimble organization, as many other states have done. So with that, Mr. Chair, we want, if we go forward, we want to build good roads. We want to assure our taxpayers they're getting the biggest bang for their buck. And I think this is one way to get the ball moving, and I would appreciate an aye vote.
Okay, thank you. Please call the roll. This is a motion for the bill.
The motion is due pass and we refer to the Committee on Appropriations. Bell?
No.
Bell, no. Canella? Allen?
No.
Allen, no. Bates? Bates, aye. Berryhill? Berryhill, aye. Gaines? Hertzberg? Leyva? Leyva, no. Liu? Liu, no. McGuire? McGuire, no. Mendoza? Mendoza, no. Pavley? Wykowski?
No.
Wykowski, no.
If I could just make one comment to Senator Morlock. I got that ticket on the same freeway that Senator Hertzberg mentioned. I rode in, they immediately reimbursed me. So I got to say there was great customer service, and I would encourage Senator Hertzberg to write a letter next time. Thank you for the customer service.
Thank you, Senator Morlock. The vote is 2 in favor and 7 against. We'll hold a roll open for other members to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.